Dr. Meredith Rowan preferred to schedule new patients at the start of the week, when her mind felt the cleanest. Mondays had a crispness to them, a sense that the slate had been rinsed overnight. By Thursday, the edges often blurred. Trauma work could do that. Stories seeped in, slow and quiet, until they left their own impressions behind. Still, even on her worst days, children unsettled her the least. Or so she believed until she met Darren Cummings. He sat on the sofa in her office like someone bracing for bad news. Straight-backed, hands tucked between his knees, a posture that would have seemed disciplined if not for the tension humming beneath it. His eyes kept drifting to the doorway, as though measuring how long it might take to sprint through it. His mother, Elena, hovered nearby with an exhausted smile that suggested she hadn't slept well in weeks. Meredith closed the file, already memorized. "Thank you for coming in, Darren. I know meeting someone new isn't easy." The boy's gaze flicked up, then down again. "It's fine." His voice was barely audible, but steady. A practiced steadiness. Meredith recognized the type. Children who learned to swallow their reactions long before adulthood required it of them. Elena stepped forward. "He hasn't talked much since the accident. Not the way he used to. Sometimes he forgets things he shouldn't forget." "Big things." Meredith nodded. "We'll take it slow today." Her office was calm by design. Warm lamplight instead of overhead glare. Muted earth tones. Framed landscapes on the walls. Shelves held books in neat rows, spines unbroken. A corner humidifier whispered softly. Nothing sharp, nothing intrusive. Trauma survivors needed space where nothing jumped out at them. But Darren looked as though the room itself made him uneasy. "Why don't you sit with me for a bit?" Meredith asked. Elena gave the boy's shoulder a gentle squeeze and moved to the chair beside the sofa. Darren stayed rigid, tiny tremors passing through his legs. Meredith folded her hands in her lap. "Your mother told me you had a scare near the lake." Elena inhaled. "More than a scare." They found him face down in the water. No heartbeat. They were minutes from giving up when he suddenly... She stopped herself. "Well, he came back." Darren didn't lift his head. Meredith kept her tone measured. "Do you remember anything from that day?" The boy's breath quickened, subtle, but his shoulders tightened. "No." "He really doesn't," Elena added quickly. "We've tried. It just upsets him." Meredith turned her attention back to the child. "That's all right. We don't have to talk about it yet." She watched him carefully. Children didn't hide their discomfort well. Not on this level. There was fear in the set of his jaw, not nervousness. Something deeper. Something tied to instinct. "What do you remember before the lake?" she asked. A long silence. "I don't know," he said. Elena rubbed her forehead. "That's the problem. It's like he leaves pieces of himself behind every day. His birthday, his favorite colors, what grade he's in. It slips away and then he looks at me like I'm telling him about someone else's kid." Darren's fingers twitched between his knees. Meredith shifted to a gentler line of questioning. "What about mornings? Do you remember waking up today?" He hesitated, then gave a tiny nod. "Some of it." "What part?" "I brushed my teeth." "And before that?" A faint crease formed between his eyebrows. He stared at the rug as though it contained the answer. "I don't know." Meredith offered him an encouraging smile. "Memory loss after trauma is common. It's not just forgetting," he whispered. It's like something takes it, pulls it out. The words were strange enough to make Meredith still. Children sometimes describe dissociation in metaphor, but this felt different, almost literal. Elena's voice tightened. Honey, don't start with that again. It does, Darren insisted softly. It takes things. I can feel when it happens. Meredith leaned in slightly. What takes them? Darren's eyes lifted to hers for the first time. They were a striking, pale blue, washed out in a way that didn't seem natural for a child his age. The water, he said. Meredith exchanged a quick look with Elena, who gave a strained smile that wasn't really a smile at all. Sweetheart, Elena chided gently. Dr. Rowan knows that's not how memories work. But Darren kept staring at Meredith, and there was no childlike exaggeration in his voice, only certainty. It follows me, he murmured. A chill crept along Meredith's arms. She pushed it aside and adopted a calming tone. Sometimes our brain makes symbols when we're afraid. Water can stand in for something else. A feeling you don't have words for yet. Darren shook his head. It's real. A tremor ran through him, small but unmistakable. Meredith decided to shift tactics. Would it help to talk about something easier first? Something you do remember? The boy's breathing slowed a bit. He nodded. All right, she said softly. Tell me about last week, anything you recall. He repositioned his hands, accidentally letting one slip from between his knees. Meredith reached out instinctively to offer reassurance, a touch meant to anchor him. Her fingers brushed his knuckles. The world tilted. A cold rush surged into her mind, immediate and overpowering. The office blurred. The hum of the humidifier vanished. In its place came the echo of lapping water and the muted thud of a heartbeat fading into silence. For a moment she stood knee-deep in a lake she had never visited, watching dusk settle along a distant tree line. A figure moved behind the boy in that vision, a silhouette rising from the water, dripping, faceless. Then the scene snapped away. Meredith gasped, steadying herself on the arm of her chair. Darren's face had gone pale. I'm sorry, he whispered. I didn't mean to. It just happens. Elena straightened, alarmed. What happened, Meredith? The psychiatrist forced her focus to sharpen. It's all right, Darren. Did you feel something just now? He nodded. I gave you something. I don't want to, but when I get scared, it goes into whoever I touch. Meredith tried to control the unease rising in her. What goes into them? He lowered his eyes, voice thinning to a thread. My bad memories. Elena let out a strained noise. Darren, please. But the boy wasn't looking at his mother anymore. His stare fixed on Meredith, as though hoping she finally understood something no one else had believed. It doesn't want me to keep them, he said. They belong to it. Meredith felt faint pressure in the back of her jaw, a phantom echo of submersion. The afterimage of the shoreline lingered. Not like a dream, but like a memory grafted onto her mind. She had no explanation, she had no framework. But the fear on Darren Cummings's face was real. And whatever lived behind his eyes felt older than any trauma she had treated before. The dream didn't feel like a dream at all. Meredith woke before dawn, with damp hair pressed against her cheek, and the taste of lake water lingering at the back of her throat. She lay still for several seconds, heart steady but mind refusing to settle. The room was dark. perfectly ordinary, yet the memory replayed with unnerving clarity. Not a dream, not imagination, a replay. She closed her eyes. The scene came back instantly. A twilight shoreline, muted purple sky over black water. Darren ahead of her stumbling through the shallows, and something rising behind him. It emerged without disturbing the surface, as though the lake parted to let it through. A figure shaped like a person but wrong in its proportions. Long arms trailing behind it, head slightly bowed, shoulders dripping in a slow, continuous stream. There were no eyes, yet Meredith felt its attention sweep over her. When she forced herself upright, she pressed both palms against her temples until the room stopped spinning. Her pillow was cold but dry. The dampness she felt came from inside the memory itself. She showered, dressed, and made coffee she barely tasted. Nothing about the morning felt real. By the time Darren's next session arrived, Meredith had rehearsed every rational explanation she could muster. All of them collapsed the instant she opened her office door. Darren stood at the center of the room instead of the sofa, posture taut, arms wrapped around his ribs. He didn't look frightened. He looked defeated. Elena hovered behind him, wringing her hands. "He didn't sleep," she whispered. "He kept saying the images weren't his anymore." Meredith shut the door gently. "Darren, can you tell me what happened?" The boy shook his head. "You first." Her pulse steadied, but something inside her chest tightened. "What do you think I saw?" "You were in it," he said. "In that place. I felt you there when it left me." Meredith hesitated before speaking. "I had a dream yesterday morning. It felt unusually vivid. I saw the lake. I saw you in the water. Darren swallowed hard. "And something behind me." "Yes." He let out a shaky breath, lifting his face only enough to watch her movements. "That wasn't a dream. That's the memory I push into people when I'm scared." Meredith's voice softened. "Is that what happened last session?" "I didn't want it to. I never wanted to." A tremor crossed his hands. "You touched me and it spilled into you. A lot of it." Elena dropped into the nearest chair. "Darren, sweetheart." "It's real, Mom," he said, no anger in his voice, only exhaustion. "You know it is. You were there when they pulled me out." Meredith stepped closer, slow and measured. "Tell me what you remember from the lake." Darren shuddered. "Almost nothing. The parts I do remember, I wish I didn't." "Start small," she encouraged. "What's the first thing?" His eyes unfocused. "The water was quiet." "Too quiet. I remember walking, maybe chasing something I dropped. Then everything went still. The surface changed, like it was breathing." Elena's hands tightened on her knees. Meredith kept her tone steady. "What happened next?" "I shouldn't have survived." The words came out flat, as though he'd carried them for months. "Something grabbed me, pulled me under. I felt cold all the way inside my head. When I woke up in the hospital, the thing that took me wasn't finished." Meredith took a slow seat across from him. "You said it takes things from you." "Yeah." He blinked rapidly. "It took the memory of dying." Meredith's breath caught, but she forced it through calmly. "Explain that to me." "When someone drowns, the lake keeps their last moments," Darren whispered. "I wasn't supposed to keep mine. When they rescued me, that memory stayed in me. It didn't belong there anymore. The spirit wants it back." Elena closed her eyes. Darren continued, voice thinning. "I think it's angry, and when I'm scared, pieces of those moments jump into someone else. I can't stop it. I don't even know when it'll happen until it's too late. Meredith folded her hands, grounding herself. Darren, what is the spirit? He stared at the carpet for a long time before answering. It looks like a person made of soaked clothes. No face, no mouth, just water. But it knows me. It follows me at night. It gets closer every time I lose a memory. The quiet that followed felt heavy, like the pause before a confession in a courtroom. Meredith leaned forward slightly. If it wants the memory you're carrying, why give them to others? I'm not giving them, he said. I'm dropping them, like pieces falling out of a pocket. But every time it loses another piece, it gets angrier. And now you have some of them. She felt a flicker of cold along the base of her neck. Darren, she said softly, what happens when someone else carries part of the memory? His eyes finally lifted to meet hers. It goes after them instead, he whispered. It follows whoever has the newest piece. Meredith kept her posture still, but something deep in her mind shifted. The spirit wasn't chasing the boy, not anymore. It was following her. Detective Alan Holcomb's office always smelled faintly of old paper, polished wood, and the faintest trace of pipe tobacco. Despite the fact that the building hadn't permitted smoking in over a decade, Meredith had interviewed him only once before, when a former patient of hers had been involved in a missing persons case. She remembered him as thorough, even-tempered, and possessed of an uncomfortable talent for reading between lines. He recognized her the moment she stepped in. Dr. Rowan. His eyes drifted to the crease between her brows. You're carrying something heavy today. She didn't waste time. It's about a boy you pulled from Calder's Hollow Lake 2 months ago. Holcomb closed his file and gestured for her to sit. Darren Cummings, right? I was wondering if someone from your end might eventually come asking. Meredith sat across from him. His symptoms are unusual. That's one word for it, Holcomb muttered. He leaned back, folding his hands over his stomach. What brings you here? I need context on the lake, she said. Not the official report, the other stories, the ones that don't get written down. Holcomb let out a long breath, then stood and crossed to a filing cabinet in the corner. From a bottom drawer, he retrieved a worn binder held together with cracked binding tape. This, he said, placing it on his desk, is the archive. Meredith opened it carefully. The binder contained incident summaries spanning nearly 40 years, all connected to Calder's Hollow Lake. Drownings, near drownings, bodies recovered under circumstances inconsistent with the reported timeline. Several pages described children who had vanished months after their rescue. Others noted sudden onset cognitive decline, personality disorientation, and in one case, total identity confusion. Holcomb tapped a photograph. A boy no older than 9, staring blankly at the camera with an almost hollow expression. That one was rescued in '94, kept claiming something was coming for him. Lost most of his vocabulary within 6 weeks. What happened to him? Meredith asked. Holcomb hesitated. Disappeared from his bedroom one night, no forced entry, no footprints. Parents still hold out hope, but it's been 30 years. Meredith flipped through more pages. Patterns took shape, ones she didn't want to see but couldn't deny. These cases, they all deteriorated the same way, she said quietly. Memory loss, Holcomb confirmed. Paranoia, transfer of fear to caregivers, recurring nightmares featuring the lake. And right before the final break, Witnesses report seeing a figure at the waterline. Meredith paused. Describe the figure. Tall, drenched, no face to speak of. Holcomb met her eyes. That match what you've heard? She didn't answer. Holcomb pulled out one more document, a handwritten note, yellowed with age. Early officers called it the drowned one, he said. Not official terminology, obviously. More like folklore passed between shifts. The idea is simple enough. Some people don't come back from the lake clean. Something follows them, or claims what should have stayed claimed. Meredith's throat tightened. Darren says it wants the memory of his death. Then it's one of the old cases all over again, Holcomb said. Never understood the rules, only the pattern. She closed the binder gently. Darren isn't just losing memories, he's transferring them, sometimes into me. Holcomb's expression changed. Not disbelief, recognition. So you've seen something. Meredith didn't admit it aloud, but her silence spoke for her. Holcomb leaned forward. Listen, whatever is happening with that boy, you need to understand something. Everyone who carries a piece of that lake's unfinished business ends up seeing the same thing you did. And the spirit doesn't stop just because the memories move around. It follows the newest trail. Meredith steadied herself in the chair. She had been expecting a warning. She hadn't been expecting confirmation. She closed the binder again. What do I do? I don't know, Holcomb said frankly. If there was a solution, someone would have found it by now. All I can tell you is this: survivors go missing when the lake decides the debt's overdue. That's not acceptable, Meredith said, her voice firmer than she felt. Then you'd better tread carefully, Holcomb replied. Because if the spirit's watching you now, the timeline's already shortened. As she left the precinct, the evening sunlight felt weaker than usual, as though filtered through a thin, invisible haze. The parking lot stretched out before her in normal proportions. Cars aligned in their familiar rows, yet the world carried a subtle wrongness she couldn't name. She unlocked her car and paused, momentarily unsure which key belonged to the ignition. A chill crept through her as she realized she had driven this route 100 times but couldn't recall half the landmarks she had passed on the way in. With a trembling breath, she started the engine and made her way back toward her office. Her memories weren't simply fraying, they were rearranging, and every missing piece seemed to leave a quiet echo behind it, like water withdrawing from shore. Elena Cummings arrived 10 minutes early for the next appointment, marching into Meredith's office with a stiffness that suggested she'd rehearsed what she wanted to say and feared losing her nerve. "We need to talk before you see him," Elena said. Meredith closed the file she'd been pretending to read. "Of course, please, sit." Elena remained standing. Her eyes were red-rimmed, not from fresh tears, but from the sort of strain that refused to break. Darren told me what he said last time about the water wanting something back, about things following him. Meredith watched her carefully. "And how do you feel about what he shared?" "I feel like he's scared enough without adults agreeing with his stories." Elena's jaw tightened. "You're the one person he might still listen to. I need you to tell him it's not real." Meredith folded her hands on the desk. "From his perspective, it feels real. Dismissing that outright could—" "Look," Elena cut in, voice rising. "I was there when they dragged him out of that lake. I saw his skin. I saw his eyes. If I let myself believe that something came back with him that day, I'm not sure I could keep going. So I need this to be treatable. Psychological, neurological, anything that has a name in a textbook." Her gaze sharpened. "Please don't feed whatever story his brain is telling him." Meredith let the silence stretch, thinking of the binder in Holcomb's office, of old photographs with the same vacant look in the children's eyes, of the image that intruded whenever she closed hers, the stretch of black water and a shape rising from it. "I'm not encouraging his fear," Meredith said. "I'm trying to understand the form it's taken. That's the only way to help him." Elena's shoulders slumped, some of the fight draining out of her. She finally sat. "He's all I have left. I can't lose any more of him. Not to the water. Not to stories about ghosts that won't let go." Meredith hesitated before speaking again. "Has he ever mentioned seeing someone at the lake since the accident? Not just in dreams. In the house? In reflections? Out of the window?" Elena blinked slowly. "Sometimes he stares at the yard and says it's closer." "What is?" "The shore," she whispered. "We don't live near any water." They both fell silent. A knock interrupted them. Darren's small voice came through the door. "Can I come in?" Elena stood quickly, smoothing her blouse. "We're done," she said, more to herself than to Meredith. "We're done with this conversation." She opened the door and let her son in, brushing his hair back as he passed. "I'll be right outside, sweetheart." Darren nodded without looking at her. His eyes sought Meredith's immediately. She gestured to the sofa. "Come on in, Darren." He stepped into the room with unusual care, as though checking for uneven ground. His gaze swept the corners, the ceiling vent, the bookshelves. Only once he'd confirmed nothing was waiting for him did he sit, perched at the edge of the cushion, hands clamped on his thighs. "It followed you," he said quietly. Meredith sat across from him. "Tell me what you mean." "It knows you have part of it now." He glanced past her shoulder toward the office window. "It doesn't like that." The humidifier's whisper filled the space between them. The air felt cooler than usual, even though the thermostat on the wall still read 72. "What happened after our last session?" Meredith asked. "I woke up in the middle of the night," Darren said. "I thought I was alone. Then I felt someone standing near the bed. I didn't look right away. I already knew who it was." He swallowed. "When I finally checked, it was closer than before. It used to stay by the door. Now it was almost at the mattress. Water kept dripping from its sleeves, but there was nothing on the floor. And I knew it wasn't there for me this time." Why do you say that?" "Because it kept twisting, like it was trying to face two places at once, toward me and toward you." Meredith's fingers twitched in her lap. "It left," he added, "but not all the way. It doesn't leave. It waits." As if to punctuate his words, a low hum passed through the building, a fluctuation in the electrical system, maybe a momentary dip. The lamp in the corner dimmed, then steadied. The humidifier cut out for a beat, then resumed. Meredith glanced at the window. It reflected the office as usual: 2 chairs, a sofa, shelves. Her own silhouette. Darren's small form across from her. No extra figure looming anywhere behind them. The glass, however, carried a faint sheen that reminded her of wet stone by a lake shore. She forced her eyes back to the boy. "Darren, last time you said something important." "You said the memory doesn't belong to you, that the lake wants it back." He nodded miserably. "It was supposed to keep it. That's the rule. If someone dies there, their last moments stay with the water. But when they pulled me out and started pushing on my chest, the moment of dying didn't finish properly. It stayed in me. Now it's stuck." "How do you know that?" Meredith asked. "Because it told me," he said. "When I first opened my eyes in the hospital, I saw it in the corner. It talked without a mouth. It said, you You owe me what you took. I didn't understand. I still don't. A chill traced the line of Meredith's spine. And when you drop pieces of that memory into other people? She asked. What happens to you? I forget things, he said. Sometimes whole days. Sometimes faces. He wet his lips nervously. I can't remember what my dad's voice sounds like anymore. Mom plays old videos, but that doesn't bring it back. It's like part of my head is hollow now. Meredith considered her next words carefully. Darren, I need to know something. When you gave me part of the memory, did it change how the spirit behaved? He looked at her with something like guilt. It turned toward you. You were brighter to it than I was. Like a new bruise. Silence fell again. Meredith shifted slightly in her chair, and the cushion gave a soft creak. Her palm brushed against the armrest as she moved. Darren flinched. Don't touch me, he blurted before flushing with shame. I'm sorry, there isn't much left. If I lose more, I don't know what I'll be. I'm not going to touch you, Meredith said gently. We can talk without that. He nodded, trying to steady his breathing. The lamp at her elbow flickered again, this time for longer. The room seemed to cool another degree. Meredith glanced at the thermostat. 72? A faint, dripping sound came from somewhere behind her. She turned. No leak, no visible source. Only the window, and the subtle way the outside world through its glass looked a fraction darker than it had when the session began. She faced Darren once more. If the spirit is angry that you kept the memory, and angrier that it moved into someone else, what will it do to restore the balance? Darren swallowed hard. Take whoever has it now, completely. His gaze slid away. It doesn't care who. It only cares that the memory goes where it belongs when it's done. Which is where? Meredith asked. In the dark, he whispered. At the bottom. She thought of Holcomb's binder, of the missing children, of case notes that ended without resolution. It occurred to her with alarming clarity that she might already be on the same path. Each new fragment lodged inside her, pulling her closer to a place she had never seen in waking life. Yet, outside the door, Elena shifted in her chair, the faint sound of fabric moving against fabric filtering under the frame. Life continued in the hallway. Phones rang in distant offices. Someone laughed. Brief and oblivious. In this room, the air held a different quality. A quiet insistence that something else shared the space. Meredith straightened. Darren, I need you to be honest with me. How much of that memory is still in you? He hesitated for a long time. Then, not all of it. How much? His eyes shone, not with tears, but with a kind of weary apology. Enough that if I touch you again, you'll have the rest. The words settled between them like a verdict that had already been read aloud. Meredith realized then that this was no longer about treatment notes or gradual progress. The next step would involve more than cognitive exercises or grounding techniques. To help this boy, she might have to carry every last second of his almost death herself. And whatever waited in the lake would be watching. The drive to Calder's Hollow Lake took less than 20 minutes, though Meredith remembered none of the landmarks along the way. It wasn't that she failed to notice them. It was more like her mind slid over every detail, unable to retain anything except the narrow stretch of road directly ahead and the boy in the passenger seat. Darren sat with his knees drawn together, arms wrapped around his stomach as if holding something fragile inside. He didn't look out the window. He didn't speak. The silence between them stretched until it felt like part of the road itself. "You're sure this is what it wants?" Meredith asked. Darren nodded once. "It wants the memory back where it belongs. And you believe that going there will settle things?" Another small nod. Meredith tightened her grip on the wheel. "Your mother is going to call the police when she realizes you're gone." Darren didn't answer. The trees thickened as they approached the lake, forming an uneven arch above the gravel entrance. The late afternoon sun filtered through the branches in narrow bands, leaving much of the ground in cool shadow. The lake appeared beyond the clearing, flat, dark, unassuming. A sheet of glass under a dimming sky. Meredith parked near the edge and turned off the engine. She didn't open her door right away. The quiet outside felt unnatural. No insects, no birds, not even the whisper of wind through the reeds. As though something had asked the world to hold still. Darren finally spoke. "It's close." Meredith stepped out of the car. The gravel shifted slightly under her shoes. She had walked near lakes countless times in her life, but this one felt wrong before she even reached the waterline. The shoreline curved in a way that strained her depth perception. Trees along the opposite side seemed a little too tall, like they were leaning inward. She walked with Darren toward the shallows. Each step made the quiet deepen. The water reflected the sky without a ripple. That stillness carried a weight that pressed on her thoughts, narrowing them down to a single awareness. The memory inside her had begun to stir. She felt it behind her eyes like something surfacing. "Tell me what to do," she said quietly. Darren stood a foot away, staring at the lake as though expecting it to speak. "You give it back. You let it finish. That's the only way it stops. And if I don't?" He drew in a shaky breath. "Then it takes you completely." Meredith removed her shoes, rolled her pants to her calves, and stepped into the water. It was colder than she expected. So cold, her breath escaped in a thin sound she barely controlled. The chill climbed her legs, numbing them before she took a second step. Darren stayed at the edge, fingers clenched at his sides. She moved deeper. With each step, the water darkened beneath her. The lake bed dropped off faster than it should have. A few more strides, and she stood waist deep, arms prickling from the cold. Behind her, Darren whispered, "It's coming." She turned. The surface behind her shifted. No splash, no disturbance, but the water rose in a human-shaped column, lifting itself into the outline of a figure. It formed slowly, as though sculpted by unseen hands, gathering strands of dripping darkness until it had shoulders, arms, and the faint curvature of a head. Meredith felt a pressure in her jaw, the same pressure she'd felt the moment Darren touched her in the office. The memory inside her pushed upward again, demanding space. The drowned one moved forward. Its arms dragged behind it in long arcs of water that dissolved back into the lake. Where its face should have been, there was only a cascading sheet of liquid, steady and silent. Meredith forced herself to stand still. "I know what you want," she said. The figure halted several feet away. The water between them trembled, faint lines spreading out in thin, concentric rings. The memory cracked open inside her mind. Images burst forward. Darren thrashing under the surface, hands reaching upward as murky green swallowed him whole. the crushing silence, the desperate instinct to breathe, then the split second where consciousness faltered. The world narrowing to nothing but pressure and fading light. She felt all of it at once. Her knees weakened, and she leaned into the water for support. It enveloped her arms, pulling the heat from her skin. The drowned one extended something that resembled an arm but blurred at the edges. Water dripped upward along its length, defying gravity. It touched her forehead. Not gently, not violently, simply with the finality of a signature. The memory rushed out of her in a torrent. Her breath hitched, not from fear, but from the sudden emptiness left behind. The moment of drowning tore itself free, unraveling from her thoughts, as though being reeled out through an invisible thread. She saw flashes of the boy again, eyes open underwater, still aware during the last second before blacking out. Then she saw something new, a brief nod from the spirit, as Darren's body floated upward toward the rescuers. A hesitation. A ripple of displeasure when the boy revived on the shore. The memory had been claimed once already. A debt interrupted. As it pulled the final thread from Meredith's mind, the spirit paused. The water around her rose slightly, as if inhaling. Then the pressure released. Meredith stumbled back, knees buckling as she caught herself on her hands. The cold bit into her palms, but her thoughts cleared in a way they hadn't in days. The intrusive visions, the ones that lingered at the edges of her perception, quieted. The lake stilled again. The drowned one pulled its arm back. The edges of its form softened. The dripping slowed. It began to sink, not like something drowning, but like a candle melting, its shape dissolving into the lake until only the faint suggestion of a head remained above the surface. Then that too vanished. Meredith stayed in the water until the cold forced her to retreat. She trudged toward shore, legs trembling, breath shaking as she reached the gravel. Darren rushed forward, grabbing her arm. "Did it take you?" he asked, voice trembling. Meredith knelt in front of him. "No. It took what it was owed." Darren stared past her toward the lake. "Is it gone?" "I think so." She cupped his shoulder gently this time, and he didn't flinch. "How do you feel?" He blinked several times. "Lighter? Any memories missing?" He thought for several seconds. "Not new ones, not today." She exhaled slowly. Behind them, the lake remained still and dark, but not watchful anymore. Not waiting. They walked back to the car in silence. The quiet no longer felt oppressive, just ordinary. At the edge of the tree line, Meredith glanced back one last time. No figure stood at the waterline. No silhouette waited beneath the surface. Just a lake, unremarkable and still. As they drove away, Meredith felt something she hadn't felt since the first memory transferred into her. Space. The water inside her mind had receded. The shoreline of her thoughts had returned to its proper shape. Darren leaned his head against the window. "Do you think it'll come back?" he asked softly. "Only if another debt is made," Meredith said. He nodded as though that answer gave him more comfort than it should. By the time they reached town, the boy had fallen asleep. His breathing was steady, his face calm. Meredith parked in front of his house and watched him for a moment, struck by the quiet dignity of a child who had carried something no person should carry. She woke him gently. Elena threw open the front door, frantic and relieved all at once, pulling her son into her arms. Elena looked at Meredith with a question she couldn't form. "It's over," Meredith said. Elena didn't ask how. She simply nodded, clutching her son tighter. As Meredith walked back to her car, she caught a faint reflection in the window. Just herself, nothing more. No shifting water, no trailing darkness. Still, she couldn't shake the sense that the lake had not forgotten her. Debts had been balanced. But awareness, true awareness, left marks of its own. She started the engine and pulled away, the memory of the water's cold still lingering faintly along her bones. An echo of something returned to its rightful place, and Calder's hollow lake remained behind her. Quiet, patient, whole again.